So the global economic scenario post-pandemic may be a good idea to start with, because always when we take up any strategy planning, it may be a good idea to look at the environment we are operating. In the last millennium or so, I think the major two setbacks which affected almost the 7.8 billion people in this planet, which are pandemic and the war which is currently going on, which has virtually challenged almost all economies in the world. So I was just trying to figure out what is the kind of economic situations prevailing across the various developed countries as well as the developing country. Is about 150 countries are in the verge of economical collapse, and very strangely that all the developed economies are also facing serious problems. So you notice that there are quite a number of them, the inflation rates are in the double digit. And there are very few economies, fortunately the growing economies in the Middle East as well as in some of the Far East countries, they are in the lowest level of single digit inflation. So this is something very strange which has brought about a lot of introspection among the business leaders, that how we are going to look at certain areas of organizational efficiency. So basically most of these countries which have brought into a significant amount of economical growth, they focused on infrastructure, diverse income and manufacturing capabilities. In terms of the developing countries, particularly India as of now, is focusing on four aspects which are essentially digital connectivity, logistics, transport and energy. And as far as the diverse income is concerned, a very balanced income coming from manufacturing, utilizing the natural resources and strengthening the service sectors as well as exploiting the tourism. In terms of manufacturing capability, it focuses on technology, capacity utilization, as well as cost optimization. Now the overall trend is progressing in macroeconomics in these directions. So having gone through a very major setback, there are certain major paradigm shifts are happening. Earlier we were focusing on globalization, now it is exactly going into the self-reliance point of view. The earlier focus was profit first, now it is becoming a very balanced approach of customer first as well as the profit first. So that is the paradigm shift that has taken place. Coming to the microeconomic scenario, which is essentially focusing on many of the industries, there are certain boardroom concerns which normally we hear whenever we meet the top leaderships. Some of them are, very strangely, the return on investment, a typical American company which is shown here, is dropping down dramatically from 4% to almost less than 1%. It's very strange to see that in spite of so many technological developments and advancement in systems and other supports, the return on investment on the business is coming down. And we had the privilege of carrying out diagnostic study in many businesses. We were able to figure out the opportunities that exist, how we can reverse this trend. So there are four major CEO concerns as of now the business leaders are facing. The burgeoning cost. Very interestingly, now there is a focus on many areas which are uncovered in the past. Recently I was in touch with one of the multinational which wants to look at the senior management productivity. There are areas which were not ever thought about. How can we improve the productivity of our own senior leaders? So demand to supply gap is increasing on particularly developing economies, where suddenly there is a huge shift coming up from particularly from the developed countries for sourcing their requirements from some of these countries. India particularly facing a huge problem on demand to supply. And depleting people morale because of the pandemic, many companies are trying to restore the confidence of the people that they are in the right business. And supply chain challenges are, as I mentioned before, are increasingly becoming important. A detailed study shows that there are three factors which is shown at the bottom of the visual are contributing basically technology, methodology, and management efforts. Very interestingly, the research has shown that methodology contributes 80% of the organizational capability. That is where lean is coming from. When you say methodology is nothing but the way in which the organization is set up, their value stream is functioning, how their shop floors are laid out, how the non-value added activities are eliminated, and so on and so forth. The contribution comes from 80%. Very strangely, technology contribution is about 50% in terms of restoring the profit leakages from the company. And in terms of management efforts, the contribution is 5%. By any superhuman management efforts, the contributions are limited, because unless otherwise we enroll the people and then create robust systems, we will not be able to recover the profit leakages in the company. So keeping in mind, we thought that out of the quarter century of our association with various industries, we found that there is a cookbook way of looking at your profit leakages and systematically bring back to your profitability improvement. That is where we and Naveen has joined hands and then brought this concept of profit leadership, shifting from the traditional leadership approach to profit leadership approach. Many times people are surprised that profit is quite obvious. That is the very purpose the organization exists, and the leadership is always focusing on them. But what we found was there are huge amount of profit leakages are happening in the organization. We carried out this exercise for a couple of companies in Oman, and we figured out that there are many profit leakages are not brought under the management accounting system. With the result, they are not being looked into a specific opportunity. There are industries which were recurring losses for over many years. We are able to arrest these profit leakages and become profitable in the same financial year. So we found there are 5 basic profit drivers in most of the industries. One of them is first to market. The ability of the organization to develop new products and new services, how in a shortest lead time they will be able to develop first time right and bring into the market is a very critical aspect of profitability. Second is optimum working capital. The moment we say working capital, generally we think it's a manufacturing company related aspect. But there are many service industries. We found there when the concept of inventory is brought about, you can bring in an enormous amount of cost saving, because information waiting for somebody to attend becomes an inventory. So the concept of working capital is becoming a very important aspect. Velocity of information flow, because the major background of lean itself is when you are able to improve the velocity of the value flow across your organization, its ability to increase its income and profitability improves. Of course, if it's a manufacturing company, the velocity of material flow and how efficient their distribution systems are. There are many organizations have looked at their entire logistics with a different perspective. How in the shortest time they are able to reach their customers. That is what is the approach right now. Essentially, people don't mind re-engineering their entire business model, which substantially brings in the idea of design thinking. Design thinking is nothing but look at the value creation that we are doing to our customer and then see how we will be able to deliver that in a more efficient way. So in other words, I think the more objective way of looking at this point in time, although there are so many disruptive kind of forces are acting on organization, as Einstein said, in the middle of difficulty lies the opportunity. So what I see is a tremendous amount of positive energy for people to look at areas which they have never looked at in the past.